Welcome to another episode of DD on the Spot. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Johnson. And before we get into it with our current guest, well, first of all, if you are a longtime listener, you should recognize our guest. We have Kristyn back on from all the way from Australia talking to us. And, obviously, if anyone remembers what she looked like the first time, we can totally tell that she's just about outside of a show right now, but we can totally tell because the last time that she was on, she was in the middle of her off season. So, I mean, just see, I'm even speechless right now just even looking at her because it's a completely night and day transformation and it's just so amazing. But Kristyn, thank you so much for coming back on. I really appreciate it.
It's all right. Thank you very much for having me.
Well, I got to ask first of all, because I love to torture myself. What is the weather like in Australia today?
The weather is about 17 degrees.
And again, I got to remind everyone that she's talking in Celsius, not Fahrenheit. I got to remind all the Americans on here because then they'll be like, oh, 17 degrees. It must be just be absolutely freezing there. But no, but and that's just so awesome. And I mean, it's been what, like a year and a half since we last talked. So why don't you just give us an update on what you've been up to since then? I mean, obviously we can tell your look is a little bit different than the last time we had you on, but what else is new? What have you been up to the last year and a half? Because so much has impacted everything.
Well, I'm from Melbourne, so in Australia, all of the things that happened with COVID hit Melbourne really hard. So we were in lockdown for the better part of 9 months last year. Um, so basically, I just spent the whole year throwing myself into training and really researching and working on the areas that I needed to bring up for my next show. And that's basically how I spent all of last year.
Yeah, we can totally tell. What's one area that you think you improved the most on since we last talked?
Well, I was advised that I needed to get bigger shoulders and a bigger back, and I think that was my focus. So I really reduced my leg training because I was lower body dominant, and yeah, hopefully my delts will. They're obviously big enough now for Australia.
Oh my God, yeah. So okay, so the one area that a lot of women struggle with is shoulders. So anytime someone with nice shoulders comes on, I got to ask them. So what does a shoulder day look like for you? Because I will get killed in the comments down below if I don't ask you that. Being people will be like, Ryan, why didn't you ask her what she trains her shoulders? Because I've been trying to get my shoulders to look like that my entire life. But what does a shoulder workout look like for you?
So I base most of my programming on Joe Bennett. I'm not sure if you've heard of him. So I do a lot of like lying cable laterals, sort of a lot of face down Y's and W's. I don't really ever do, but like you never see me pick up a dumbbell and do a lateral raise. But yeah, that's basically it. So I just work on more sort of around the 10 to 12 range. Um, and just that's it. My training doesn't really change much. It's pretty boring, but it's all based on Joe Bennett. So
Has your nutrition changed up at all as you've obviously put on more size and got it more defined?
we got to a stage last year where I needed to have 3 refeed days to keep growing. So I was running like 4,700 calories 3 times a week with 660 grams of carbs. Um, it was very difficult to get that amount of food in off season, but it meant that I was able to prep on much higher calories and no cardio. So it was all worth like the overfeeding in the end.
Wait. This look is the result of no cardio?
Yeah, not one bit of cardio was done in prep.
What? That is insane. No car-
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's just okay. I don't even want to talk to you anymore because that's already like making me feel no cardio at all. That is ridiculous. So I don't know. I mean, she probably made a deal with the devil. Everyone. That's like the only really real reason that I can really say that. But no, that is absolutely insane. So I mean, yeah, that is just incredible. So yeah, I'm almost speechless as even talking about that in and of itself because no cardio. That is the goal from everything for me. But yeah, and then when it also comes to just dealing with all this stuff, I mean, how did you deal with, like we were saying before, like the gyms being shut down in Australia and everything going into lockdown? I mean, did you have enough stuff at home or did you have a gym that you could go to that was still, like letting people go in? What was that whole experience like?
Well, I have a 3-story townhouse. Um, when it was sort of when I could see that it was going to happen and will maybe locking down, I didn't wait. I already knew, like I worked out exactly what equipment that I would need to continue to not just maintain but grow. And then right before we actually went into lockdown, before everyone purchased all of the available equipment, I already had on order a Smith machine, cable machine, leg press, hack squat, dumbbells that go up to 45 kilos each, incline bench. So really, I had and 420 kilos of weights. So I went like a bit crazy, but I'm glad that I did it because once we actually locked down, you couldn't get anything.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, we have heard so many stories about, the people, yeah, that were prepared for it. They really did, not suffer as bad. But along with putting on the size too, do you feel that your overall strength has gone up as well when it comes to like numbers, or do you still do more of like the time under tension stuff, or what's that overall, transformation sort of from you been like when it comes to your lifting as well?
I basically focus on heavier weights. So I think that it creates more sort of density in the muscle, and it's easier to maintain, that dense muscle in a prep if you continue to lift that load. Like I said, I base most of my training on what Joe Bennett says, and I really do believe the as little as possible method makes the best for me. So yeah, pretty much just heavy loads, progressing in strength. I didn't progress too much in strength, but I definitely reduced the amount that I was training. Um, Fearful at first because it was new to me, but I found that resting every 4 days made a massive difference, and I put on a lot more size than I previously had, not just smashing my body.
So let me get this straight. You've rested more, not worked out as much, and you've done no cardio, and you ended up looking like that. That is,
Yes, but I was like crazy disciplined. Like I didn't eat off plan at all in off season. So I spent like 15 months totally religiously following my plan. When we came out of ISO, I had one meal out. That's it. So I think that like because I was like so crazy dedicated, I sort of earned my metabolism.
how was your nutrition different for this prep than the last one? I know, like you said, you were super strict with it, but what are some other ways that you really, this prep was different from other ones?
Um, this prep, obviously the higher calories. Towards the end, we reduced my refeeds to two a week, not one. So, yeah, obviously a lot higher calories. Towards the end, the last 4 weeks, we just held my calories at 3,100. I think roughly 450 grams of carbs. Didn't change it in peak week. Towards the end, just added like an extra, I don't know, 20 to 50 grams of carbs a day. And that's it.
You're also a couple of weeks past a show. Are you getting ready for another show too? Because like you have not put on any post show weight. It looks like.
I put on about, I reckon about 3.5 kilos. Um, I feel like I'm always sort of 8 weeks out of comp. So if I really wanted to, because I stay relatively lean in my off season, so I don't plan on bulking again because I think I've got enough size. Sorry. I'd love to go overseas, so I'm just sort of waiting for the borders to open. Um, and then I'm just going to do all the shows. And like I said, I stay about 8 weeks out of each show, so um, yeah.
That I mean, yeah, that sounds good as well. And yeah, I can't wait for stuff to open up as well. But who knows, how long that is going to be. And how did you deal with this whole year sort of in isolation mentally too? Because so many people, like with the sport of bodybuilding, they only talk about the physical side of it. But how did you deal with all this mentally and just being so laser focused in your goals? Because I will be honest, like if there was one year to be completely just focused in on something, it would be this last year because you had more free time. But how did you deal with all this stuff mentally?
Like I think for me, I stayed working, so I worked corporate. So my days were really full because our workload actually increased, went crazy numbers. So it was actually we're doing double to triple the amount of work as normal. So that sort of kept me occupied during the day, and then obviously training at night. It was I sort of I don't mind training alone. I did miss the social interaction, but I sort of threw myself into training, and then if I felt low, I'd work on my routine. So I would sort of like get like, yeah, posing, working on your routine. And I think it really impacted my posing too, made me a better poser. So I just pretty much ignored COVID and focused on my goals, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I've known people, yeah, I mean, especially if you're more isolated too, yeah, it's a lot easier to just ignore it and just, really be focused on your goals. But you mentioned how your posing's changed. How would you describe your posing has changed in the last year and a half since we talked?
Definitely my lat spread's changed. So previous previously I had sort of an impingement, or I don't know what it's called, in my scapula. And for I think from 2012, 13 onwards, even to my last show in 2019, I was always terrified of turning around and doing the rear double bicep or the back pose because I felt like it was so ugly. Um, so I went to a really great physio right at the start of um, COVID, and he gave me rehab to do just to sort of bring that scapula out. Um, and I do it twice a day, every day, and now I can. I think my rear double biceps probably one of my strongest poses now.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, I can agree with that. And now, I mean, out of your physique poses that you do now, what is your favorite pose and what is your least favorite pose?
hmm, it's a tough one. Yeah, my favorite pose is the rear double bicep. I think
What about your least favorite?
least favorite, the ab pose.
Oh my god, everyone! No, I don't think I've met two people on this podcast that have actually liked the ab pose because yeah, it's just so awkward. Look, it's hard to make it look natural and just how to have it flow with the rest of your routine. But yeah, it is yeah, absolutely, absolutely ridiculous. But one thing that I think a lot of people in the U.S. have struggled with when it comes to just being a bodybuilder this last year is that the shows kept getting delayed or getting canceled. How did you deal with all that mentally too? Just knowing that this show might not be on time, like we might have to cancel, like, especially people that I've known people that had to go on like 11-month preps where it's just like, oh my God, it just sounds awful. But how did you deal with all that?
Well, I was prepping actually last year for an October show because we thought that that was sort of going to go ahead. Um, it got cut at 10 weeks out, and I was sort of prepared mentally for it. I think this time we were in a much better position in Australia, where I'm from Victoria. So, some towards the end of prep, Queensland blocked its borders to us, and that's where the main show was being held. But I sort of, in my head, knew that if they didn't reopen borders, that probably because of how the head of the IFBB here, he's sort of Tony Doherty, he's really, you know, I'll do whatever if there's a chance, I'll make the show run. Excuse me. Um, so I sort of in the back of my head knew worst case scenario, he'd probably have it in Victoria because everyone could come here. But yeah, so that was a little bit stressful at the end. I think that happened at like 3 weeks out. I already had everything booked for Queensland, and Queensland were set to open their borders like 2 days before my flight. Um, so I think I just sort of ignored it and just thought about what the worst case scenario would be, which would be the Victorian show. Um, yeah, but it wasn't like a great feeling. And I do empathise with all of the overseas athletes because I was speaking to some women here that were prepping for overseas shows, and it was just, devastating for them. And Arnold's got cancelled last year, and I had some, friends that were competing, and I think that was really tough on them as well.
So how have your friends and family been dealing with all this pandemic too, and just with everything that's going on? Because I mean, you created your own sort of kind of bubble where you just laser focus on what you were doing, but how did the people around you that you cared about deal with it? Because I was sort of like you, where I sort of just got really into podcasting even more, and then I just had my set routine, but I had family members that were just basically going crazy by all this.
Yeah, it was really hard with, a lot of my friends are in the fitness industry and weren't so lucky. So it was hard sort of watching them go through that, and then trying to offer my support where I could. I also felt guilty because I had work as well, so that was hard too because I felt like these people had no work, had nowhere to train, and I sort of had it all set up. So I did feel guilty about that um, as well. But then on the flip side, I was like, well, you know, my job was really stressful and tough too. And I invested a lot of money into my gym. So, it's sort of like,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, absolutely. Yeah, it's you. Yeah, you did. Yeah, you put that investment in, and it paid off. And I mean, yeah, that is just yeah. I mean, and I saw that happen to so many other people too, where we had some businesses around here that closed down that I really really enjoyed just because they couldn't. It's just yeah, it's been a hard time for so many people, but it's good for people like us that we were able to just sort of focus down in there. But you mentioned that increased workload, and I mean, out of all the stuff that you've been doing, I mean, with this workload that you had increased, and then doing with all this training too. I mean, I could not imagine being able to do that myself. So again, it just goes to show like just the bodybuilding spirit that people have. But on top of all this too, with this, with the weather that it is down there, where it's usually nicer out and stuff, have you how is because we talked about last time, how whenever you're a bodybuilder and you walk around in public, I mean, you are going to get some stares from people just because, it's human nature when they see something that's not of the normal, just look, but especially the way that you look right now. I mean, if you were to walk out in public, I mean, people's jaws are going to drop. So how have you been dealing with, this attention that you get now, especially now that you're in your prep look as opposed to your off? I mean, you looked amazing last time we had you on too, but it was an off season look where it's not going to be as recognizable as obviously you're looking right now. So how have you been sort of dealing with that? I mean, even going outside to like go get groceries and stuff like that, because we've heard stories where, I mean, it turns into this whole thing where everyone has to come up to you and ask you like, oh, what do you do? How can I look like that? Just stuff like that.
yeah, it's been a little bit mentally challenging for me. Like when I was in Brisbane and I was like comp shredded and covered in that brown tan. I had all these plans to sort of go outside and do all these adventures, and then I'd go outside and I'd feel like some sort of weird creepo because everyone would be like, so I felt a bit uncomfortable, so I just, didn't do all the things that I planned to do. Um, in the gym now, I found that my first week post show, I felt a lot of anxiety going into the gym because I was sort of getting approached by everyone, and I'm sort of introverted. So people would come up and I'd be like, oh, because I always feel like they expect something more of me. Like, are you excited? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, but I felt really weird about it at first when people were coming up, and because it's also like weird when people are like, oh, congratulations, I follow your journey. And I'm like, I don't know who you are. Do you know what I mean? It's flattering. But yeah, I wasn't really prepared for the attention that I was going to get afterwards. But I'm okay with it now. But
And what was that moment like for you when you were walking on that stage and they announced that you're a pro now and you realize like, oh my God, all this hard work has finally paid off and I'm a pro?
I was actually quite shocked. Um, it's a funny story. Like I went, I did like my routine, and then I went backstage, and like we'd done all our posing, and we were sort of all like really jammed in together. So they put us on stage and they moved us close together. So when I went to hit some of the poses, I couldn't actually get into my front double bicep without putting one arm sort of out here because I was going to hit the other girl next to me. So we're really sort of jammed in. And then we were told our routine was only going to go for like 45 seconds. I'd planned a minute, so I sort of rushed through the poses I want to get through. And then it actually ended up running for 60 seconds, and I'd finished, and I was like, oh, what do I do? So I just made up some poses. And then I went off stage, and I was just like, I had this like massive sinking feeling in my heart. And I was just I leaned up against the wall, and I was just like this, like just thinking, oh my God, after everything, like, every single day after, you've just stuffed it up. And then one of the MCs came out and asked me what gym I trained at because I hadn't put it on my form. And then, I went out and they called Kristyn for third because there was another Kristen Stewart. I'm like, okay, cool. I actually was expecting to get the second. Um, and then, yeah, when they called me, I was just like, oh my God, I won. What do I do? How do I react? Go walk out, smile, be happy, you know? And then the MC came up to me and he came over and he said, oh, I thought you said you stuffed up your posing. I'm like, mm-hmm. And then they asked me to do a speech and I was totally not prepared for a speech. Um, and I'm just like, I had no words at that stage because it was, I think I got to the venue like 8 a.m. and they put us physique girls on at 6 p.m. So we're literally lying backstage, like just trying to hold condition all day, which was quite hard, like to keep the lines in my glutes. It meant sort of like minimal food, minimal water, not too much flexing. It was just tiring. Um, so yeah, by that stage I was just like exhausted and like my speech was so crap. And then my friend texted me and she's like, um, I love you. Your speech was so awkward. Classic Chrissy. And I'm just like, yep, awkward. But yeah. And then my coach came out and he was like, yeah. And then I literally went backstage and sat by myself for like 40 minutes, just rehydrating and preparing myself mentally to go out and face everyone. But yeah, it was great. Definitely like the best feeling ever.
What was your post-show meal that you had to celebrate?
Went out, just had steak and potatoes, like nothing exciting, and small dessert when I got home because I had a shoot with Charles Lurfin the next morning, and I sort of wanted to keep my calories consistent with what it had been because I knew I looked good on those calories, and the shoot was like my pro shoot, so I didn't want to risk going in there and being like,
Hey, I gained 10 pounds last night. Yeah, let's go do this. Yeah.
if I for me, if I had like gone in there and not had striated glutes, which is the first place I sort of hold water, I would have been like annoyed with myself. So yeah, I waited until I got back to Melbourne and then went out, had dinner, did all the ice cream, and
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, that's just insane. And yeah, just winning that pro card is one thing that so many people just don't understand. I mean, it's the highlight of your career just because that's just the affirmation of all of that hard work. And I mean, this last year, has it really put things into perspective to you of like what you need to do in order to be a pro now, just knowing that you've made such a drastic change? And I mean, now you're just a little fish in a big pond now that you're a pro now. So what are your plans on, how to really step things up? Because I mean, as much as people are just like, oh, I got my pro card now, it's like, well, now the real fun begins.
yeah. Look, to be quite honest, I just want to get over there and see how I compare in the lineup. I don't think I need to put on much
Yeah.
size, really. Um, when I look at photos side by side, I seem to be like in a good place with size and femininity, which is obviously what's important in um, women's physique. So I really just want to get out there and see what where I stand, what the feedback would be. Um, yeah, but now I'm like back to square one. It was a bit like I can't really ever compete in Australia again. So that was a bit, I don't know.
Why can't you ever compete in Australia just because they have no pro shows?
I do women's physique pro
Oh,
shows.
wow.
Sort of put it in perspective and thinking, well, I usually take a year to 18 months off between shows anyway, so it's not really different. Um, yeah, but it's going to be really, exciting and a really great experience to come to America because I plan to do multiple shows, like jump around from states.
Have you been to the States before?
No, I haven't.
Well, I'm going to say you're going to enjoy the food then because, God, the portion sizes are like 3 times the size that you have in Australia. So it's going to be hard for you to really, get used to that. But is there any particular shows in mind other than obviously like the Olympia and the Arnold and stuff? But is there any other shows that you've been looking at that you'd really want to do?
maybe like Tampa and Chicago. Um, I definitely want to go to Vegas. Um, yeah, definitely. As soon as borders open, I'm going to Vegas. Um, do a shoot with Sean Nelson, so that will be amazing.
I could never go to Vegas myself just because I am a degenerate gambler, so I would end up losing everything and then just having to leave there in disgrace. So, I best to stay away from Las Vegas for me, but yeah, that is just, yeah, so incredible. And out of all the things too, I mean, how has these last years and a half changed you mentally as well? Because like I was saying with bodybuilding, so many people notice the physical changes. You'll get people that'll come up to you and say like, "Wow, you look amazing," but they don't notice that mental transformation that has taken place as well, especially after this year of just being so locked in and focused on everything. I've made the comparison all the time of I tell people like if you can do a prep, you can do anything in your life because it's just so regimented. But how do you think that this whole year and a half has especially changed you mentally and just knowing that you can go to that extreme that you need to get in order to get this look?
Look, I think it's just made me stubborn. I actually, I had a couple of challenges during prep that I never advertised, but I sort of, kept going through it. Just health wise, and it wasn't even an option for me to not train or to stop. If that makes sense. Like it's just like it's not even an option for me to stop unless there's actually a real rational reason for me to stop. Um, then I don't want to weaken myself mentally by succumbing even one day to giving up. Does that make sense?
100%. And how do you deal with those days? Because let's be honest, anyone can say that like, oh no, I've never has those days where I don't feel like working out, but everyone has those days. How do you mentally push through that? Because I think that's what separates so many people from achieving their goals. Just those days where they're just like, oh my god, I really don't want to work out, and then they're able to convince themselves not to. But you knowing that like this is like your life straight up, where it's like I understand that mindset because I used to have that like as extreme as well, where I'm like, I have to get my workout in every day, otherwise I'm gonna go crazy. But how do you deal with those days mentally when even with all of the mental fortitude that you have, you're still gonna have those days where you're just like, oh my god, I really just don't feel it today.
Yeah. Look, I have days when I don't feel like it, but I suppose, I'm not sure how I feel. Like I don't try to argue with myself about it. I just have the thoughts and the feeling that I can't be bothered, but I still just continue anyway. If that makes sense. Like it's just I don't try to dissipate it or anything. I just might be. I feel unmotivated. I don't want to go to the gym, but I'll just go anyway. That makes sense.
It's really just about just going to. I mean, you can complain all you want, and then I just eventually tell myself, I say, well, what's it going to feel like if you stop working out and then you gain some weight and stuff? And I sort of just use that as motivation myself. But it's just so incredible. And for anyone out there that's struggling with, getting in shape, obviously being that I mean you're a bodybuilder, not everyone's gonna want to become a bodybuilder, but just for people that are looking to just get in shape, what piece of advice would you like to give them? Because I feel that so many people just struggle with just taking that first step in the gym, which is just so important.
Yeah, I suppose any advice for that I would have for anyone that's sort of wanting to take that next step or find something that you enjoy doing. Like, don't go to the gym if you're gonna hate it. Don't you know just starve yourself if you're gonna hate it. Find something that you actually enjoy that you want to go and do. If you need people, do classes. Um, yeah, because if you don't like training, you're not going to do it. If you hate cardio, you're not going to do it. Do you know what I mean? I think that you need to find something that's realistic and maybe not go. I hear people all the time, they start up and they're like, I'm doing cardio every morning and then training every night and from like nothing. And I'm like, oh, well, you're going to stop in 2 weeks because your body's just going to like crash and you're going to crash and you're going to not feel the same about it. So yeah, I think probably just going to finding what you love, and then maybe getting some advice from a professional coach, like on the sort of volume you should be doing or how often you should be doing something.
Yeah. Or they could just be like you and find a program where you don't have to do any cardio at all, and that would make everyone's life so much easier. But no, yeah, that is, and just yeah, anyone just go for a walk then if you just even want to get started. I mean, that's the simplest thing, and it really helps with things. But yeah, I mean, there's a million different ways that people can get in shape too. Like you said, if you don't like working out, I have friends that do just yoga, or I have friends that go on bike rides. There's more than one way to get in shape, and so many people just think that, oh, I have to go to the gym and I have to lift weights and stuff. It's like, yeah, it's good for a lot of people, but there's some people that I know that are even in better shape than me, and they've never touched a weight in their life. They just do other things. So it's really all just about finding out what works best for you. And again, that is just so much trial and error that really goes into it as well. And I just, yeah, I cannot preach that enough on this podcast, because it's not going to work for everyone, whatever you want to do. So it's just, yeah, finding things out yourself. But I mean, on top of all this too, if someone were to walk up to you and say, Kristyn, we made the decision, you can change one thing about the bodybuilding lifestyle in general, and everyone would want to go along with it, what would be one thing that you would like to see changed?
Do you mean like in Australia, or
Or you could just do like competing, really. If you could change one thing about competing, what would you choose?
if I could change one thing about competing, it'd probably be like the whole tanning process, the removing of the hair from all of your body, the 4 coats of tan, the having to like sort of walk around like a creature for 4 days. It's sort of it takes up a lot of time. Um, yeah, and that by the time
You're talking to a guy with the whitest skin, where I'm literally gonna have to get about 4 coats before I'd even get any semblance of anything looking like. So yeah.
like, don't get me wrong, I love the color on stage. It looks amazing, but the whole process behind it, like all the body hair removal the day before, the scrubbing of the skin, going to get the tan, having to wear the tan to bed, getting tan everywhere on the sheets, then going to get another tan and tan everywhere, and then washing the tan off, and it's just, yeah, that bit's a bit, it looks good, and I can see why it's necessary, but if there was a way that you could just get tanned on the day, it'd be great.
Absolutely, yeah. If they need to figure out something where it's just like a little spray thing that you can do where it just sticks on automatically. I mean, if they did that, I mean, it would be outstanding. But sleep is another thing that I love to talk about, because it's the most important thing in this lifestyle. And just hearing your schedule, how your work got even busier, and you really crank things up with your workouts, I was like, oh God, her sleep must be terrible. But how is your sleep managed throughout this pandemic? Because we've had people where they have nothing better to do, so obviously they get more sleep, and then we've had other people kind of like you where they've really struggled, you know with doing more stuff where their sleep has struggled a little bit. But where do you fall on that? Has your sleep gotten easier, or has your sleep gotten harder as you've gone on during your prep and during this pandemic as well?
My sleep was okay, so it was sort of normal. Um, it didn't really change during the pandemic. I sort of napped where I could as well to make sure I had enough, sleep if I hadn't slept well the night before. Um, the last couple of weeks of prep, sleep was a bit crappy, but that always happens. And then I'm sort of post show sleep was pretty crappy, but I'm sort of on top of it now. But yeah, during COVID, it was normal, I suppose. So
Well, and I love to hear prep brain stories, because for anyone out there who doesn't realize what prep brain is, I mean, it's your brain gets a little foggy as you're going to prep because you're just so dieted down, and sometimes you do some goofy things. So, do you have any funny prep brain stories where you like maybe you forgot car keys, or you just other stuff happened? Like for some of my competitors, I mean, they just completely lose all sense of mind and control and stuff. But what do you have anything interesting that happened to you because of just how depleted you got?
I did keep losing my car keys. I kept losing them everywhere. And then I had to drive one day and I'd lost my car keys and I just couldn't find them anywhere, but I had to go somewhere. So I like got my spare car key, which didn't have a house key on. I'm like, oh, should I leave my house on? Like, should I? Yeah, just do it. Shut up, go. Then I went and drove to where I was going, which was a shopping centre. I did my like 10-minute task and came back. I could not find my car for the life of me, even though I took photos of where it was on my phone, so I knew I'd forget. And I'm just walking up and down the aisles, like, come on, I know I parked on the right side. It ends up I parked on the left, like all the way over there. I came home like I can't find my key, like I just can't find my key. But I was like obsessed with trying to find my key, and I just just relax, just relax. And then eventually I went to the fridge, and it was like in the fridge, from the night before I came home from the gym. Went straight to the fridge, put my key in there, grabbed my meal. Then I bought like a key tracker to put on my keys, so it would like beep. Um, but you have to like activate it, so and it makes a beep when it's activated. So it's always got to be connected to Bluetooth, and if you go out of range, it turns off and then starts beeping and going device out of range. So that didn't work.
And yeah, we've heard that hundreds of times too. And I was going to ask you too about the wildfires that happened because people forget right before COVID hit, there was wildfires. And, not that many people remember that because COVID obviously took over the news story, after that happened. But were you near any of the wildfires? Because we've had a couple other Australian guests on that were closer to it. And I mean, they got to see some of it, but were you in any of the range of that? And did you have to deal with any of that?
No, I wasn't in range of that. I'm close to the city, so we had, the smoke was horrific. Like you could see all the smoke. My parents were sort of in the range of that, so I was a little bit concerned about them. But it never looked risky to get out to them. My brother actually, he has like this big army truck. Um, he just owns it because he used to be in the army and he just likes this truck. So he bought a truck and he actually gave up work. So he stopped working for that period and he drove around with his big army truck, taking water everywhere. He rescued like a farm of huskies that was like, entrapped in fire and drove them all out in his truck. So um, that's mostly how I was involved, just trying to help financially by raising some funds for him because he was just, stopped working and was just paying for everything with his bank account. Um, so yeah, that, and then obviously when COVID hit, everyone just forgot about the fires.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, and I mean, I would have done the same exact thing that your brother did, just because anytime, yeah, I heard about all those animals that were getting burned and stuff. So yeah, I would have dropped my job too and just been like, "Yep, I'm going up there and I'm doing that." So yeah, that is just so awesome. And I mean, it's just been an interesting year. And I mean, again, if we were to talk to you a year from today, where we're gonna make it a year now, we're not gonna wait a full year and a half. But where would you like to be at just in your journey? Are there any goals that you'd like to have achieved a year from now? I mean, I know you're waiting for things to open up so you can travel. And I can hope probably by around like the summer, the fall time, they might be able to open up now. But in an ideal world, where would you like to be at a year from now if we were to talk to you?
In a year from now, I would like to have, what month is it? April. I would like to have done at least one or two shows overseas. Yeah.
Now, we mentioned before that there was one body part that took off for you now. Is there any body part now? I mean, I know you said that you don't want to put on that much more size or you don't think you need to, but is there any one body part that you think you might need to develop just a little bit more in the off season?
Um, I suppose just continue to work on back width because I am very lower body dominant. So just to continue working on, I suppose, the width. I've got plenty of thickness, but just to make sure that I don't get out of proportion down the bottom. Um, yeah, that's probably it.
Yeah. Well, that's the problem. That's the problem when you become a bodybuilder. You always become not enough, with anything that you do. So, it's always a never-ending struggle to go, uphill and whatnot. And yeah, that is just so awesome. And yeah, I mean, it's just so great to have you on to talk again. I mean, obviously, I'm gonna be completely honest. Out of the times that I've had guests come back on, yours is the most significant change that we've had from like first. But then again, like I said, we had her in the off season, so it's not. But I mean, it's just so amazing that you got your pro card, and I mean, I wish nothing but the best for you. And I honestly think that you're gonna do great when you come over here. You're gonna have some really nice placings. But is there anyone that you'd like to give a shout out to before we wrap things up?
Yeah, my coach Chris Thomas. He's he was my coach last time. He's amazing. Like he just knows my body, and as my body changed, he adapted. My nutrition and training, so he didn't do the same sort of prep the second time. My good friend Aaron has been a massive support to me, like emotionally, as well as just being in my corner, going above and beyond. Yeah, and all my friends.
Yeah, that is. Oh, well, yeah, obviously you got to give those a shout out too. Yeah, obviously, but yeah, again, you guys, I mean, we cannot thank her enough for coming on and I mean, obviously, I can't wait to see what she's gonna do a year from now, just based on, the changes that she's made in this last year. And, yeah, obviously, everyone go and give her a follow. I'll leave a link to her Instagram page down below. And, buyer beware. You will get inspired to get off that couch and stop eating those Twinkies and, get in shape. But again, Chris, thank you so much for coming back on and talking with us. I really, really appreciate it.
No worries. Thank you for that. I also, sorry, have to shout out my sponsors, BPM Labs.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah.
They're great. They provide me with all my products, and they're a really great team to be part of.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll leave a link to BPM Labs too down below. But lastly, before we wrap things up, I do gotta, because everyone's gonna be asking me like, how again did she have to do like no cardio and get more rest and still get that look? So remind us again what you did, because for anyone that might not have been listening the first time, they're probably going to be like, okay, what did she do again? But so how were you able to do, like, what did your coach recommend so that you were able to put on more size like this through no cardio? Which, I mean, I'm one of those people where I have to walk 10 miles a day just to even lose anything, and then through less training.
Um, so I think like my body just kept catching up to the calories. So we just held my calories, and I would just end up leaning up on the same calories anyway. I didn't get that in my off season anyway. So I was always like probably most 10 weeks out by anyone's standard. Um, Keeping my weights the same, so lifting the same weights, that was just pure stubbornness. In my head, the muscles will always work. So the muscles are separate to how you feel. So even if you feel fatigued, or even if I felt fatigued, I could always lift the same. So I think that, yeah, I was sort of determined, like, I built this size and I'm not going to let myself, lose it. Like, lift that weight, Chrissy, sort of thing. So I think that helped too.
I cannot argue with that too. And again, you guys go and give her a follow. I'll leave a link down below. And this is Ryan Johnson, DD on the spot, signing out. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you very much.